Welcome to Epithets, exploring the sacred titles of Hekate.
Hey everyone, we are excited to continue our exploration of the three names of Hecate in the PGM. Last time was Actiophyes, and today we're covering Ereshkigal. And as we said in the last episode, this is kind of the easier one because there's a lot about it, but uh it's not Greek. That's and well, I don't know if you want to. Usually, this is when we kind of hand it over to Robin because of her background with ancient Greek, but uh, neither of us have really any background in Sumerian, and which is kind of where this is from. But Robin,
Yeah. Well, Ereshkigal,
what? Yeah,
from what I've read, literally means something like the queen of the great below, the lady of the underworld, which I think is really neat because it sounds a lot like Anasa Eneron, which is one of Hecate's epithets we've already talked about. That literally means queen of the ones underground. So these are really similar names. I think it's easy to see how Ereshkigal and Hekate kind of got conflated in the PGM because she's another underworld goddess. But yeah, her name literally means queen of the underworld, or queens of the ones underground. Queen of the great below.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I mean she's a very cool underworld goddess,
she
and
is.
it's fun that they use her name in the PGM, which Robin has some great insight in. But before we get into that, maybe we can talk a little bit about Ereshkigal and who she was and where she comes from. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Well, I can start with the story that I was going to tell, but maybe open it up a little bit. So she's very Hades-esque. If you're thinking Greek mythology, but instead of a king of the underworld, it's a queen. And she is the one that is overseeing the kingdom of the dead, working very, very closely with all these ghosts and these dead beings. And that's actually where the first of the more well-known stories of Ereshkigal come up. It's the descent of Inanna. So Inanna is her sister and another goddess, and Inanna was so Inanna was headed to the underworld for Gugulana's funeral, and I'm not going to get into the whole story about Gugulana and how he died, but it was totally Inanna's fault, and she was kind of the reason why he died. And so she was headed to the underworld for this funeral, and Ereshkigal heard about this, that her sister was coming, and was pretty irked about it. And she had this council of seven sort of councilmen or advisors called the I'm looking through my notes because the word Anunnaki comes from it, but it's like a little shorter. Anuna. Oh, I've lost it in my notes. It's in there, and I'll find it as I'm telling the story. But they suggest to her that, you know, it's she's the reason why he died, and she should be held accountable. Ereshkigal decides to make it a little more difficult for Inanna to come into the underworld. So she talks to the doorkeeper of the underworld, Neti, and has him tell Inanna that as she's passing through these seven gates into the underworld, at each gate she has to leave something behind, some part of what she's wearing or a thing of power. And as she's dropping them at every gate, she gets to these seven gates and gets to the underworld, and she's completely naked and totally naked by the time that she gets there. And at that point, she gets to the underworld and she's held in judgment for her actions. And the Aduna have Ereshkigal sentence her to death, which is kind of an extra funny thing when she's already in the underworld. So she is executed and hung up on the wall. But Inanna had kind of figured out that this might happen. So she had her servant, Ninshabar, kind of prepare that if Inanna did not come back in 3 days and 3 nights, which is very interesting and Christ-like, that Ninshabar would go to Enki, Inanna's dad and also a god, and tell him that she was dead and she needed help. And she does that. She talks to Enki, and Enki sends these two Gala, which are like these demons, with Ninshabar down to the underworld. And they go, and these Gala torment Ereshkigal until she says, all right, fine, that, well, I'll release her, but you can't just like let her out without any kind of exchange. That's not how the underworld works. I mean, we've claimed a soul, we need a soul. So somebody has to take her place. Inanna's husband, Dumuzi, says, I'll take her place. I'll take Inanna's place in the underworld. And when Dumuzi's sister hears that he's doing this, her name is Geshtinana, she goes, no, you're not going to go alone. So they decide to do kind of a halfsies thing. Inanna gets to leave the underworld, and half the year it's Dumuzi down there, and the other half of the year is Geshtinana. And that had a really Persephone feel to me, which is really interesting. This is also, by the way, everything with Ereshkigal, this is very old. This is older than ancient Greece. This is probably around 2000 BC. But that's the first story we get with Ereshkigal. And Robin has another story of Ereshkigal.
I do, and it actually has some interesting parallels. It's another kind of, this is like the reverse Persephone. This is Ereshkigal. How Ereshkigal met her husband. Nergal is the god of war. So anyway, the story starts with a party. Mesopotamian gods are having a party. And the father of the gods realizes that Ereshkigal is not there. Ereshkigal is not there because she can't be there. She's in the underworld. She cannot come to the party with the gods. So her father, not wanting Ereshkigal to miss out completely, sends a messenger down to the underworld. And the messenger says, please send a representative to the party. And Ereshkigal's like, all right, cool. And she sends her representative Namtar to the party. And all of the gods are very respectful to Namtar. All of them bow to her, except for Nergal. Nergal refuses to bow to Ereshkigal's representative. And his father, Ea, is not cool with this and says, as punishment, you got to go down to the underworld yourself. Nergal is sent down to the underworld, but he's sent down there with a very clear warning. Things he must not do in the underworld. He mustn't sit on a chair. He mustn't eat. He mustn't bathe. And most importantly, no having sex with Ereshkigal. So Nergal goes down to the underworld. He remembers most of these. But
most.
You can probably guess which one he breaks. He meets Ereshkigal. They immediately retire to her bedchamber, and they stay there for 6 days.
Wow, good for them.
Good for them. Well, on the 7th day, Nergal remembers that actually was not supposed to happen, and he gets kind of scared. So he goes back to heaven, and he has his father ritually cleanse him so that Ereshkigal's minions can't find him. Ereshkigal's not happy about this. She's very not happy. So she sends her representative back with a message that says, send him back. He's mine now. And if you do not send him back, she says, I will open up the gates of hell and allow the dead to come forth and eat the living. She's gonna do a zombie plague if she doesn't get her man back. So the other gods are like, they let the representative look for him, but because he's been cleansed, they can't tell that it's him. Nobody can find him. And sadly, we don't have the whole story. But at some point, when the story picks back up again after the fragments, Nergal is storming the gates of hell. He's on his way to the underworld to find her again because he's angry. We don't know why he's angry, unfortunately, but he goes through the 7 gates, right? And he knows he's going to have to go through the 7 gates, so he brings 14 demons with him. And at each gate, he stations 2 demons to hold the doors open. And he comes through to the courtyard of the queen and stands before Ereshkigal and pulls her off the throne by her hair. He's angry with her. And then they kiss. and retire to the bedchamber where they stay for another 7 days.
Uh,
And again, we lose some fragments. It becomes fragmented there again. But when we pick the story back up again, they're getting married, and Nergal comes to rule over the dead with Ereshkigal, and they come up with an arrangement actually where Nergal is above ground 6 months of the year as the god of war, doing war stuff, and the other 6 months he's with his wife Ereshkigal in the great below. I love the story. I think it's such a great story. It's too bad we don't know why he's angry, but it's like such a romance novel moment, right? When he storms the gates of hell and comes through and throws her down, and then they go off to the bedroom for another week.
the magic happens.
It's great.
You know, and she seems to have quite a few. Ereshkigal is a busy lady.
Yeah,
She seems to have quite a few consorts.
yeah. And I'm not
So,
sure if that's meant to be like simultaneous, or it's just because the story's been around so long that we have a lot of different stories of her. If it's really meant to be that, oh yeah, she has this lover, then she has that lover, or if
mhm,
she has different people at different times tell the story differently. I don't know. Like,
right.
because this is so old. This stuff is like, as you say, it's like 2000 BC. So there's, and you know, this story is handed down for centuries and centuries. So there's a lot of ways for it to change around. But you can see why that's sort of like
Yeah,
reverse Persephone, where you know she's the queen of the dead and
yeah.
her consort comes to her. Um,
Hmm.
it's also really different. Both these stories, I think, have a really different flavor from Greek mythology. These are definitely
Yeah,
not, these are not Greek gods. They don't behave like Greek gods. Um, it's really different.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's I don't know. It's pretty fun.
it is. It really
This has
is.
definitely inspired me to dig into Sumerian mythology a little more because I really know very little about it. It's never been it's never been one of my hyper focuses.
Yeah,
So
it's not
it's
as
like,
accessible either. It's I think it's a lot harder to find. We have here in Philadelphia, we have a University of Pennsylvania museum has a lot of artifacts from Sumer and Babylon, from you know digs where things were appropriated from those regions in the early 20th century. But they have a whole lot of really cool like old Sumerian artifacts.
mm.
I spent a lot of time at that museum in the 90s, so that's where most of my familiarity comes from. But if you're ever in Philly, that's a must visit museum.
Oh, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, you can come visit sometime.
Yeah, no, it's on the list. It's on the list for sure. Uh, so it's really fun to to look at this and to see this used in a magical way
Mhm.
in Greek magic, because we were talking about how, the distance from present day right now between us and the PGM is about the same distance from when Mesopotamian mythology was a thing to the PGM. Like
Mhm.
it's there's a big time jump here.
Yeah. And this was the old magic to them, right? This was the old stuff. So yeah, I want to go from there to the PGM itself.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Thinking maybe we can read that spell.
Yeah.
Because it's one of
Which
the places in the PGM. It's PGM, I think that's 70. I'm terrible reading Roman numerals. Um,
I think so
Times
too.
four to
Yeah.
25. It's page 297 in the Betts edition.
The LXX.
Yes, it's LXX. But it's the charm of Hecate Ereshkigal against fear of punishment. And it's one of the places where Hecate is specifically identified with Ereshkigal in the PGM. And I just think this particular one is really cool. So do you want to read it
Hmm.
or shall I?
Oh, I will, sure. I love throwing some words. And this gets into another bit that I want to do an episode on, but we'll get there. Uh, Charm of Hekate Ereshkigal against fear of punishment. If he comes forth, say to him, I am Ereshkigal, the one holding her thumbs, and not even one evil can befall her. However, if, however, he comes close to you, take a hold of your right heel Just imagining this. And recite the following. Ereshkigal, virgin bitch, serpent key, wreath, key, herald's wand, golden sandal of the Lady of Tartaros, and you will avert him. Aske, Kataske, Eron, Orion, Ior, Mega, Samnir, Boy, 3 times. Fabantia Semne. I have been initiated, and I went down into the underground chamber of the dactyls, and I saw the other things down below, virgin bitch and all the rest. Say it at the crossroads and turn around and flee, because it is at those places that she appears. Saying it late at night, about what you wish, it will reveal it in your sleep, and if you are led away to death, say it while scattering seeds of sesame, and it will save you. Forba, brimo, azibia. Take bran of first quality and sandalwood and vinegar of the sharpest sort, and mold a cake, and write the name of so-and-so upon it, and inscribe it in such a way that you speak it over it into the light of the name of Hekate, and this, take away his sleep from such and such a person, and he will be sleepless and worried. So that's that one right there, which is, there's a lot of really interesting things there that is kind of fun to play around with. I know, gosh, I'm trying to remember who it was that was doing, that was talking about turning that first bit into something to avert danger or evil spirits.
When were you hold your foot?
No, before that, when you holding your thumb.
Holding your
So
thumb. Okay.
Doing a god form, essentially taking on, saying, I am Ereshkigal, the one holding your thumbs, while holding, making a fist, but holding your thumb
Okay.
between your pointer finger and your middle finger. I am Ereshkigal, the one who holds her thumbs, and not one evil can befall her.
Well,
I think actually the way that,
that's the
and I don't know if you can hear the
sorry.
There's sirens going by. I don't know if that's going to show
No,
up. Oh, well.
that's a evil eye thing. The feet,
Yeah.
the hand position. Okay, that's cool. I hadn't made that connection.
At least that was the connection that person had made. I think it might have been Sarah Mastros, but don't quote me on that. And I think it was just saying, I am a Ereshkigal, so, screw off. I was using stronger language. And I really like that idea of just, taking on this god form of Ereshkigal and saying, go, I'm Ereshkigal, you better run. While
it's great.
averting harm with that. But it is a really fun, and the rest of this clearly, it's related to Hekate and all this other imagery from what? Oh my gosh, referring to virgin bitch and all the rest, seeing it at a crossroad, serpent, wreath, key, herald's wand. Well, herald's wand and golden sandal. Well, herald's wand is more Hermes, but golden sandal, the Lady of Tartarus. We go back to Hekate. That's, I don't know. It is a fun little spell to avert harm. It also has the Ephesian letters, which is the thing that I want to someday do an entire episode
that's
on.
a whole other rabbit hole.
A whole other thing. Aske, Kataske, Eron, Orion, Ior, Mega, Samnia. Boy, you say that 3 times and end it with Vabantia, Semne, in a apotropaic kind of way. But that's fun. It's fun.
This just for anybody who might not be familiar, that particular formula, that Aske Kataske formula, is commonly called the Ephesia Grammata or the Ephesian letters. And I don't want to go too far into it because, like I said, it could be a whole rabbit hole. But it's a very, very old formula for protection and for warding off evil. And the reference to the dactyls is, again, it's a whole other thing, but I don't want to get into too much here because it would be here all night.
Actually, could you explain that a little bit?
Well, the dactyl literally means finger, but it's a reference to, and I don't really have a lot of notes on this.
I know
this is off the top of my head, but the dactyls are a group of 10 who are smiths. They are craftsmen.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And they're associated with the Ephesian letters. And yeah, like I said, we could go
No,
down the rabbit hole, and I
that's
don't want
more
to go too
than
far.
yeah.
But there's
That's
a
more than
lot
I do right
packed
there.
in there. A lot of references packed into that one. But that is the place, and there's some others, but this is the one where it's like really direct that this is identifying Ereshkigal with Hekate. So when we do see
Yeah.
Ereshkigal elsewhere in the PGM, um, even when it's not directly associated with Hekate, we can see that that's, you know, who they're talking about. That's why we talk about it as one of the secret names.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then there's some I had mentioned this to you earlier before we started, how there are certain parts of this that remind me of the document to the waning moon,
Yeah.
which I think we've talked a little bit about. It doesn't mention Ereshkigal, so I'll be very quick with it, but um there are certain bits that there's like there's almost like different parts that walk you through this underworld experience. And some of the things they hit on in the document of the waning moon show up in this right after, or no, right before the line after the Ephesian letters. I have been initiated, and I went down into the underground chamber of the dactyls, and I saw the other things down below. Uh, so I don't know that in a place where there's not a lot of oh gosh, not each of these spells are very much on their own. There's not a lot of flow or connection. I mean, there is kind of, but there's definitely, they're not, there's not a lot of continuity, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. There's this like moment of there's this little continuity right there that strikes me, even though they're two very, they're from different documents. But anyway, really cool stuff.
It is cool stuff. And of course, it raises the question of what is this Mesopotamian deity doing in this Greco-Roman context, right?
Well, what is it?
What is going on there? And there's not a super clear answer, but I actually found a really interesting article from an author by the name of David Schwemmer, who looked at this in detail, and I want to read his conclusion because frankly, it's not the most satisfying conclusion, but it sounds pretty spot on to me, frankly. Because he looked at it, and one of the things he talks about in his article is that there's not really any of the sort of epithets or motifs around Ereshkigal found in the PGM aren't actually consistent with Mesopotamian mythology, which says that, the people who wrote these spells didn't really know very much about Sumerian or Mesopotamian mythology. And I'm going to kind of read his conclusion here. The motivation for integrating her name into the Greco-Egyptian tradition of magical text was certainly not a desire to adopt important Babylonian deities of magic, but rather served the purpose of furnishing the Greek netherworld goddess with a mysterious-sounding foreign name. Although the choice of the name Ereshkigal reveals a basic knowledge of Mesopotamian theological typology, the use of Ereshkigal's name in the Greek magical text leaves little doubt that the experts who composed, transmitted, and used these texts had either little interest in or little knowledge of, or both, the Mesopotamian traditions associated with Ereshkigal in magical or other cuneiform texts. So there's this idea, which frankly sounds right to me, that the inclusion of the name Ereshkigal in there is because it's old, it's scary, it's mysterious. There's enough of a connection with something that people would recognize to be recognized as sort of spooky and old without really knowing a huge amount about it. And one of the things that struck me when I read this is the fact that we still do this with Sumerian, Mesopotamian mythology. If you think about horror movies, right? The Exorcist, Ghostbusters, the demon, the bad guy, the evil god is so often Sumerian or Mesopotamian or Babylonian in some way. I think H.P. Lovecraft did it. It pops up all over because it feels deep and mysterious and scary but also disconnected enough from its cultural roots for us that we don't really know what it means. We don't really know what it's about. We just know that it's kind of old and scary and weird. And I think it's really kind of cool that they were doing the same thing 2,000 years ago.
Sumerians all along.
Yeah.
But it is really cool that, or really funny that, they're just like, I don't know, there's this name. We know that she's an underworld goddess of the Sumerians, but I don't know much about her. But she sounds spooky. Let's throw her in. She's,
Yeah.
she has something to do with ghosts. So does Hecate. They're totally connected.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though, one of the things that really struck me that's very non-Hekatean is how Ereshkigal can't leave
Yeah.
the underworld. That's not Hekatean at all because
Not at all. Yeah.
she's Hecate goes between all the realms.
Hmm.
So it's definitely not, while there are themes that, you know, might have translated to an idea that then translated to Hecate, it's not, it's I've seen I've seen some online articles that were being like, oh, what are some, the Greek version of Ereshkigal is Hecate, and it's like, well, no,
No.
that's that's a really that's not even a good not yeah. There's no the only connection would be the PGM spells, which is valid and usable for sure, but
Mhm.
historically she's more just lady, not just, but she's the lady version of Hades.
Yeah. I would have
And
more in common with Hades than with Hecate.
right, but that's all right. I can also see. I really love the idea of just like I don't know. It's spooky. Let's tack it
Yeah.
on to
Yeah.
Hecate. It sounds magical,
Yeah.
and now it is.
Hmm.
Even if it's not like mythologically like neat and tidy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when is mythology ever really neat and tidy
Yeah, it's
anyway?
it's not. And I also think it's really funny, the idea of these, magicians from 2000 years ago mining these ancient texts that they didn't really understand in order to come up with really cool sounding magical stuff, and how much that sounds like how people use the PGM now.
Exactly,
I love
100%.
it. I
And
love it.
that's why it's so funny. We're really consistent humans,
Yes, we are.
in great ways and maybe not so great ways.
Hmm.
But yeah, I love that. And it works still.
It
We
does, yeah.
we 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 opened up this conversation last episode talking about how using Actiophis Ereshkigal and about the Soa has magical oomph.
Hmm.
And is that because of a connection to Ereshkigal, or is it just she is now connected to Ereshkigal because of this kind of practice?
Yeah.
I don't know.
My own personal feeling about it. Like I know we talked about, Actiophis last time as kind of a standalone thing, working with the name of Actiophis on its own as well as part of the formula. But I think for Ereshkigal, I wouldn't do that. Um,
Hmm.
I would, unless you want to work with, Ereshkigal as a Sumerian, Babylonian, Mesopotamian, whatever goddess. If you want to work with that tradition and that's, your thing, I think that's great. But as far as working with Hecate and doing Hekatean work, using the triple name formula is really powerful. But I think if I was going to um, work with Ereshkigal, I'd want to, because Ereshkigal is so powerful as her own goddess from her own culture and her own
Hmm.
story, that to try to sort of take that name out of that and just use it sort of in a PGM context, in a sort of Greco-Roman context, a Hecate context, um, to me feels like it's not somewhere I would go.
Hmm.
Just because it's so much its own thing, right? Actiophis, and I know we'll talk some more about Nubutal Soil next week, but they are less identified with such a um, unique character. Ereshkigal is
Hmm.
so much more than how she's talked about in the PGM. She's so much her own being that to conflate her with Hecate as an individual just to me feels like something I wouldn't do. Um, but the three name formula to me feels like a different thing because that's specific to the PGM. It's specific to this work, and it feels more specific to Hecatean work, where Ereshkigal on its own to me feels Sumerian.
I know that there are people that do work with
Yeah.
Hecate Ereshkigal, which is I don't know, right? An
Mhm.
interesting Um, it's so tricky because there's so much conflation that
Yeah.
it works, but if you look at it is, in a historical context,
Yeah.
it shouldn't work.
I mean, if
Um,
it works, it works. And if people are, I mean, I'm not saying that like, oh, nobody should do this. I'm saying I wouldn't do it.
mhm.
But
Yeah,
that doesn't mean
yeah,
that
yeah,
if this is a practice for you and you get something out of it and it's, good for you, I'm not going to say not to do it. But I just
right.
don't follow it.
Yeah. No, I get it. And there's a lot of other, if you want to work with Hecate in an underworld way, there are other
Yeah.
names to work with.
Yeah.
They're, just sticking with Ennadia or Brimo, though, I can't say I've ever worked with Hecate Ereshkigal on its own. So I can't really say if I was going to, I would stick with things that are um, necromantic related.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, directing the dead to in an angry mob sounds appropriate, but that's more that's more
Yeah.
Ereshkigal
Yeah.
because that's what she threatened to do,
Right.
which I love that part of the story. She's like,
Right.
if you don't make it right by me, I swear I am going to unleash zombies on all of you,
Yep.
and I can, I can. So, well, that's definitely not somebody to tick off and to anger. Uh, oh man, good for her. Though at the same time, she was swayed by uh, a few random demons from Enki. But I was also we were talking about, and this is just kind of speculation. It's always interesting to look at numbers that repeat,
Mm.
and the idea of there being these seven gates. It makes me think of the seven traditional planets, and the seven gates almost being this underworld mirror of the seven planets.
Mm. Yeah.
Or I love how the Inanna hanging, not hanging on a wall for 3 days and 3 nights seems oddly familiar. Uh,
Yep.
a lot of seems like that. Seems like a lot of deities are into the 3 days and nights
Yeah.
being pinned somewhere. Because wasn't, I mean, besides the obvious um, Christ connection, how did Odin have 3 days and nights
I
when
think
he
it
was
was 9 days.
spirit Gungnir? Okay,
I
9 days
I
would
think
make
it
more
was nine
sense
days.
because
Yeah.
that would be
So
relating to each of the worlds.
yeah, it's still
Um,
multiple three. So
always interesting. Just, noticing themes.
Mhm.
Noticing themes. But there we are.
There-
Ereshkigal.
And there is, and now I'm going to regret saying this because I'll have to look it up, but there is another PGM spell. It doesn't mention Ereshkigal, but it does mention like the 9 gates of the underworld.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but
Oh
now that I've
gosh, yeah,
said that, right?
that's not an easy research right now, and I should have had my P I have the book in front of me, but I don't have the the PDF, which I can, search out
Physical.
terms
Yeah, no, I
and
just have the physical book with me too. But I'll find it and we can like post it.
oh, nice, yeah.
Yeah, I want to
That's
post
perfect because
that.
I've been
Yeah.
pretty radio silent. Everybody's probably wondering, like, this is a week later, and the answer is my last week was finals week for me. So we decided that doing an episode on finals week was probably too much.
Yeah.
Uh, school, it's great, but it gets in the way of important things like talking about Hecate and, her secret EGM names.
Hmm.
But great. Well, next week, or not next week, but next episode will be Nabat Soleth, arguably the hardest, trickiest one that we're gonna come across. So that'll be a fun rabbit hole. Though
Yeah.
looking through some notes in the BGM, I have found different ideas, but
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see how we'll see how far this rabbit hole goes.
Yeah, it's the one that of the three that feels the murkiest to me. So I think that's going to make it really interesting to talk about.
Which is kind of funny relating to what I found already. So,
yeah,
I
think being murky
of course
is
it
part
would
of
be
the point.
murky. Right. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But I'm excited to dig in. Well, if you want to contact us and find us, you can reach out to us via Facebook and Instagram. I love it when people reach out and suggest an epithet. We have had a few people do that, so uh, reach out. I'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to explore an epithet that you've been thinking, oh man, I want to learn more about, but if only somebody else would do some of the research for me. Or even like one of your favorite epithets and you want, oh, what's your thoughts on it? Um, Definitely reach out and let us know. We'd love to get you in as part of the conversation. But Robin, you know what? I didn't even introduce us. Normally I'm pretty good
Yeah,
about
we didn't do the
introducing us.
introductions.
So if you didn't know, here at the end of the episode, if you didn't know, this this is your co-hosts, Isaac Fars and Robin Silverman, signing off, and I was excited to talk to you about the sacred names of Hecate. Do you have anything else to add for Ereshkigal before we
I
shut it
think I'm
down?
good. I'm looking forward to Nabuto Soila.
Fantastic. It's going to be great. All right. Thank you for listening and talk to you next time.